Let us begin. The
Indeed.
Twitch.
Behind the paywall, well, not yet, actually. I'm so used
Not
to saying
yet. We're approaching the paywall.
indeed. Yes. So before we start all this other stuff, we wanted to give a quick shout out to everyone we met at WonderCon. We were there this past weekend in Anaheim. Got to meet one of our guests, Joe Quinones, in person, where I got my copy of Batman '89 signed. And we also got to go to a panel led by Marv Wolfman, and I met him, basically the legend himself, when he signed my copy of A Lonely Place of Dying. So that was pretty cool. We also got recognized by a couple fans who we wanted to shout out to, including Ruben and Michael. So thanks for recognizing us at WonderCon.
Yes,
So
thank you. Thank you,
we
guys.
so
That was awesome.
in less awesome news, I mean, I should have prepared the segue a little better. Last week was was the passing, unfortunately, of comic book artist Joe Giella. He is very relevant, actually, to our latest episodes because Giella was the inker on a lot of Flash comics. So he was the inker
Okay.
on the first appearance of Wally West. I guess he made him Ginger, since that seems to be a recurring theme
Really?
of us talking about Wally West. I mean, that's just me speculating since he was the one who was inking. But he was part of it. You know, he was part of that original appearance. He
He
also
was the
contributed
first to
to.
draw those ginger colors upon his
Yes.
face.
He also did The Flash of Two Worlds, which introduced the multiverse to DC, which is pretty huge. And The Conquerors of Time, which was the issue that I believe introduced the idea that both Barry and Wally could time travel. So those are pretty big
Oh.
ones. And on top of that, he was one of the artists who contributed to the first appearance of the yellow oval on Batman's chest. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
a ton of shit this guy was involved in. So rest in peace, Joe Giella.
Rest in peace. Holy crap. I didn't know
Uh,
he did all that.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the name sounded familiar, and then I read more and more about him. Just like, oh yeah, like this is a big one. So yeah, this is a
Mhm.
big. I mean, he was basically one of the oldest living artists from that time period. So it was unfortunately seemed to happen last week when this happened. So rest in peace. But this week as well, we covered David Goyer's Flash script. So for this Patreon preview, we are going to cover could there have been an influence from the Flash show from the 90s on Goyer's script? So I've been watching episodes of the show. It's definitely the Flash done in the style of Batman '89 with a little bit of Dick Tracy too in the look of the city, in my opinion.
Mhm.
But it's got a Danny Elfman theme. It's got a comic booky version of Central City. It's got a Bob Ringwood style costume for the Flash with sculpted muscles on John Wesley's ship. But both the
Looks like the
1990.
suit didn't need much help, man. Like, look at
Yeah,
this guy here.
yeah, that's true. Like he's a pretty big dude anyway.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but both the 1990 Flash show and the David Goyer script we covered this week have someone in common, and that's the female lead, Dr. Tina McGee. So, Tina was a character in the Flash comics in the late 80s who served as a love interest for Wally West, but when they did the show in the Flash 1990, she ended up being a part of it as opposed to Iris West. So, Tina was British in the show, played by British actress Amanda Pays. And since Barry was the Flash in the show as opposed to Wally, she went from being Wally's love interest in the comics to Barry's love interest. One of the other things that Barry steals from Wally. Poor Wally.
Okay.
So, those familiar with the CW show know that the TV versions of Flash have worked with Star Labs a lot, and that's likely because the CW show was influenced by the 1990 show, where Barry entrusted his secret to Star Labs scientist Tina McGee here as early as the pilot, and she studied his speed and helped him throughout the series in fighting crime and doing his stuff as the Flash and making sure that he survived doing it and didn't burn out his metabolism and shit. So. Um, One other aspect too is that we meet Tina in the parking lot in the pilot, which is also how Wally meets Tina in the David Goyer script we talked about this week. So some influences there. When the CW started doing the Flash show a few years ago, they carried over cast members from the 1990 show, most famously Mark Hamill returning as the Trickster, but also John Wesley Shipp as Barry's dad, Henry Allen, as well as Jay Garrick, as well as even the 1990 Flash reprising that role. But they also carried Tina McGee over through Amanda Pays. This time they had her as the head of Mercury Labs in the CW show. And obviously they didn't try to hook her up with Barry or Wally in the show, but it was hinted at a potential romance between her and Barry's dad, of course, also played by John Wesley Shipp. So that's kind of the nice connection there. So there's a little bit of a history with this character, as we see, but we're going to talk a little bit about Tina in the comics and how she relates to the one in Goyer's script. So, like I said before, in the comics, Tina is Wally's love interest. She's from the comics, written by Mike Barron, pencils by Jackson Guise, inks by Jack Torrance. Not that Jack Torrance from The Shining, but another super and
You
Larry
see,
Maltby.
he loves cannibalism. Saw it on the TV.
Wendy, love of my life.
I love the dude. That shit. It's a dark comedy, dude. The Shining is a dark comedy.
Yes. Letters by Steve Haney and colors by Shelley Eiber. And so Wally is early in his career as the Flash. This is as early as the Flash #3 post-crisis in the late 80s. And he meets Dr. Tina McGee in Star Labs in Utah. And she's a nutritionist, and they work together at Star Labs to study him. And eventually they have to work together when the supervillain Kilgore strikes. So
Okay.
that's how they start off. Tina in the comics is actually originally unavailable. She is still married, and she's also 32, while Wally is 20. So this is an
Oh,
interesting
man.
dynamic. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. They're just like, this ain't Barry Allen. Straight laced Boy Scout. This is Wally West. He's going after everybody.
Straight cougars, baby.
Yeah.
If you cougar to him anyway.
Is 30, yeah. Whereas to us, it's just like that's just normal age.
Somebody younger than me.
Yeah, younger than both of us.
Yeah.
So, but Tina still ends up falling for the 20-year-old Wally, and she has been separated from her husband anyway, and wants a divorce from her husband. So, Goyer's script does have her ex-husband Jerry in the script, but they're working together. They've already been divorced, and Jerry sort of has this jealousy going on when he sees Wally hitting on Tina throughout the Goyer script. And it eventually leads to Wally mistakenly thinking that Jerry McGee is Zoom, which he finds out is wrong because Jerry gets killed in the script. There is some precedent for this in the comics, however. So going back to the comic book version, Tina, being older than Wally and still married, decides I've got to get a divorce if I want to pursue anything with Wally. So she goes to Jerry asking for a divorce. This is Tina here. She goes to Jerry asking for a divorce, and in a shocking scene, because this ain't your grandfather's Flash comic, he calls her a slut and beats her.
Oh,
So,
man.
and since she's so in love with a speedster, he decides to become a speedster himself. And so he's been experimenting with steroids and gives himself super speed through a drug and becomes the villain Speed Demon. So while he's not completely wrong in the Goyer script, Jerry McGee in the comics does become a speedster villain, just not Zoom.
Okay. That's cool.
But yeah, it's definitely one of the darker. You expect that kind of stuff in like a Batman comic, but like a Flash comic, you're not necessarily expecting darker stuff unless you already are familiar with this era. But it's the opening, literally, of I think Flash #5.
That's a big ass hand.
Oh yeah,
Arm.
he just becomes he looks ridiculous.
Is it like a little bit of body horror kind of thing, right? Like his body's kind of getting fucked up from the super juice he's on that's causing him to bald, just like regular juice does.
Yeah, and he's also not like able to control it very well, so he's always like crashing into shit when he doesn't mean to. But it's like it's done more as like he's out of control. It's not really done in like a comedic way.
Right.
So
right.
He's a hell of a concept here.
The drug addict gone. I mean, like totally lost control. Like that's Well, that was Goyer's take anyway.
Yeah, and I could see that influence here. Yeah, but I think since Zoom is a much bigger villain in the comics than Speed Demon, he sort of used the traits of Speed Demon and put it in Zoom. So makes sense. In the 1990 Flash show, Tina's husband is mentioned, but he's already dead before the events of the show, chalked up to him experimenting on himself as a human test subject. Though, I mean, who knows? This is TV. They could have planned to have resurrected him later in a surprise twist. That does seem like something that the CW show would definitely do at some point, because nobody stays dead in that universe. But who knows? If the 1990s Flash show had a second season, maybe they could have done some version of that. So, but yeah, we'll be comparing a lot more of Goyer's script to the comics and the adaptations that the characters got in the TV shows in this week's Patreon. And if you haven't already, check out our episode on the unmade David Goyer Flash script, which our Patreon patron Renee V praised, saying, quote, "The best of all the unmade Flash scripts and one of the best things Goyer has ever written. I love this script." Pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty much agree. I mean, couldn't believe how good it was. Well, I could believe it, but it was really good.
Yeah, it was really good. And so, real quick as well for this week, before we go behind the paywall, we announced this on social media and in our community. But in case you aren't following us there, a few announcements. One, I'm getting my first fiction published. This is going to be in Metaphorosis magazine in April 2023 edition, specifically on Friday, April 7th, 2023. It will be available on their website. Though, if you buy the issue itself off of Kindle for $4 on Amazon, you will get it on April 1st. So that'll be even earlier. So mine will be the first one out there. It's the short story novella called Shortcut to Happily Ever After. Cover here is based on my story, art done by artist Gabriel Roswell, and is essentially about Daniel, who you see here in the green shirt. He's a hopeless romantic who uses time travel to find love. Whenever he meets someone new, he jumps to the future to see if their relationship lasts, and if it doesn't, he returns to the present to cancel the first date before anyone gets hurt, basically fulfilling the fantasy of not wasting any time. But when his dating strategy starts ruining the fabric of time, Daniel has to go back and live through all of the relationships he skipped, discovering what he missed the first time around. So check that out when it is released. It's an original piece, and that is being released. But also, we've announced this beforehand. Something that's even more relevant to this podcast is that I'm adapting 2 Batman stories for the audio drama YouTube channel podcast Neuverse Creative for this year. One being Batman 89 Shadows, which is the adaptation of the Batman 89 comic written by Sam Hamm, art by Joe Quinones, Clayton Cowles, and Leonardo Ito. And the other is Tim Burton's Batman 3, an adaptation of the original Batman Forever scripts by Lee and Janet Scott Batchelor and Akiva Goldsman. I know what you're thinking. I've spent so long debunking the existence of a Tim Burton Batman 3, but this is kind of like, well, if we were going to do one, we're going to bring it to life in audio. Neuverse Creative is, I'm writing it. It's based off of the original scripts that we've covered in the podcast before since 2019. This will be the closest you get to a dramatization of it. And on top of that, superhero stuff you should know, guest Ian Miller of Triple Threat Comics will be adapting the fan comic Batman Enigma. So, like I've said on the different posts, Neuverse Creative is providing everyone with 3 alternative paths of where Michael Keaton's Batman could have gone after the events of Batman Returns and before The Flash, 2 of which are written by yours truly. So be on the lookout for them, and be sure to subscribe to Neuverse Creative for when those come out.
Awesome. Well, my plugs are in the middle of the regular show. I'm on recon.com, AMANORECON.com. Check that out. And Gaming Gaiden podcast. That's gaming, and then Gaiden is GAIDEN. Search for that on YouTube and Spotify and all that jazz. But is that pretty much it? Are we going behind the paywall now?
We're going to go behind the paywall. So see everyone there.
We are now behind the paywall. Oh, wait. No, I'm not. I got to play the fucking thing. Man, I'm fucking up, dude. Here we go. We're going now.